the Kansas Jayhawks on homecoming. A lot of people question, why are you having Oklahoma for homecoming? That's a really bold choice. And look,
they knew what they were doing.
It was rocking in Lawrence. Kansas 38, Oklahoma 33. We had a second quarter rain delay with 7 minutes left. Kansas was up 14-7, had all the momentum. They could have had that taken away. They have to go in the locker room for about an hour. They get 5 minutes to warm up, and Oklahoma immediately punches them back. Goes up 21-14, but these two teams just traded blows all afternoon. It was a fantastic display of offensive firepower. Not a lot of defense being played, but some opportunistic stops made by both teams. And guys, Kansas was almost dead in the water, but they really battled after two straight interceptions. They scored a touchdown with 55 seconds left. When they scored that touchdown, I was worried because I thought they left a little bit too much time on the clock for Dillon Gabriel and the Sooners. Dillon Gabriel drives back down the field, but the last attempt in the end zone falls incomplete. And this is a really streaky team. But when that offense is clicking, they are, I think, legitimately one of the best teams in the Big 12. What do you guys think about this game today? Does it hurt Oklahoma's playoff chances? How should Sooner fans, how should Jayhawks fans be feeling after this wild one?
Well, I mean, obviously it's going to hurt their playoff chances because now they got to be perfect on the way out, right? If they're not perfect on the way out, if they don't win their conference and then get a little bit of help, then I mean, Oklahoma, sorry about you. Kansas just ruined another season. And can we go ahead and just acknowledge that for a second? Kansas being good at football, I think, is just kind of filling out the country and filling up this void that we're going to have. There's this void. Everyone's talking SEC, Big Ten, mega conferences. Let's talk about, are they going to who's going to pick up James Madison, right? And so we're talking about like all these different things about what's coming next for college football. And we're starting to see some of these Big 12 teams really figure it out. And Kansas is lead among some of them. Put together a great performance today. Obviously, the weather was weird. Obviously, with the rain and the cold and everything else didn't stop their fans from jumping in the pond. So there's a whole thing.
That was awesome.
It was really, really cool, setting the tone from the very beginning. Mello Dotson with the pick six and just getting to set that tone and say, look, we're Kansas. We're going to play our game. We're not going to let you come into our house and just steamroll us. And they did their thing. And there were so many moments for them to crash and burn, right? Coming out, 14-7, and then you got to go sit in your locker room. Oklahoma gets a chance to talk about what you've been doing. They come out, they score a bunch of points. You go into the half trailing. And so you could have very easily let that affect you. You could have let that become a thing where now all of a sudden we're in our heads. Oklahoma's better than us. Oh, well, we came out sharp and it just fell apart. But then they come back. And for me, where the game turned was the third quarter fumble where it's just a kind of a sloppy play from Dillon Gabriel, fumbles the football. And then, Kansas guys following it. Very next play, Bean takes off down the side and scores on a long touchdown run. This kind of turned it into like, okay, well, we lost all of our momentum into, all right, let's have this. Let's do this dogfight, right? And that's where I think the momentum turned a little bit. But you got to give credit to Kansas because they played a great game, never backed down. They didn't quit. They didn't give up. And you gotta give them credit for that. There's a heck of a game for Kansas, and their fans clearly appreciated it. And it's them celebrating tonight more than anybody else.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta agree with you as well. I mean, if you look at the turnovers here, 3 turnovers to 3 turnovers, but you mentioned it, that Jaleel Farouk fumble in the third quarter definitely kind of felt like the momentum turned from there. Jason Bean, long touchdown run. Fans were kind of fired up. So obviously the turnovers definitely, I feel like even though Kansas turned the ball over 3 times, Kansas also got the most opportune turnovers. Obviously that kick return fumble late in the game, the fumble in the third quarter. And Jason Bean did his job. He's never going to be a game-breaking quarterback, but he can take off with his legs. Threw 2 interceptions. He threw that one right to the defensive lineman, and obviously those kind of things hurt. Yeah. And I think if Jalen Daniels was out there, it could have been a little bit of a different game as well. But nonetheless, if you're Kansas, winning games, big games against top 10 teams with Jason Bean at quarterback definitely feels like a win inside of a win. And Devin Neal, I feel like kind of did their thing tonight. And defense did good enough. And like I said, turnover battle, even though it's even on paper, felt like the momentum turnovers, that battle was won by Kansas.
Yeah. And, I think back to Kansas last year, and there was such a fantastic story in college football, but you just knew if they're going to knock off a big boy, if they're going to have an upset that sends shockwaves to the college football world, like beating number 6 Oklahoma today. They had to basically play a perfect game on offense because they knew their defense wasn't going to be much of a help. Their defense still is, significantly dragging behind the offense in Lawrence, but it's opportunistic, right? They start the game with a pick 6, and that really sets the tone for the rest of the day. They have 2 other takeaways throughout the day to overcounter Jason Bean's 3 turnovers. And it was just good complementary football when they really needed it. It was bend but don't break on defense, but that was exactly what they needed. The offense was humming. They made a really, really solid Oklahoma defense look silly at times. And yeah, it was just a fantastic win for the Kansas Jayhawks. I do want to shift the discussion a little bit over to Oklahoma because Kansas, biggest win of the season for them. They're bowl eligible at 6-2. I think they can definitely win at least 2 of their last 4. They're at Iowa State, Texas Tech, and Kansas State at home before finishing the season at Cincinnati. But Oklahoma's season now is, like you said off the top, Garrett, they have no more margin for error. They have Bedlam next week in Stillwater. It's the last Bedlam for who knows how long. So the fans in Stillwater are going to be fired up for that one. They return home for West Virginia. They go to Provo, a really difficult place to play, to take on BYU, and then they close out the season at home against TCU. The margin for error is obviously 0, but what chances do you guys have right now, sitting here Saturday night, of them getting back to the Big 12 championship game with just this 1 loss?
I would say if they can get past Oklahoma State and Bedlam, they're fine, because I don't think that BYU is a good enough team. And I don't think that they play enough good teams down the stretch. And I don't think that Oklahoma State's necessarily there. But let me tell you what, last couple of weeks with Air Gordon, right? OG2 as they're calling him in the booth, but Air Gordon is the locals nickname for him. Ollie Gordon II, tees up, baby. They found something with him, right? They've absolutely found something there. He had another monster night tonight. We'll talk about that game in a little bit, but when you start to find it and you start to get hot like that, you get a player who's just on fire. He can take over games and change games. So Oklahoma's going to have to come in and do a good job stopping the run. Not something they did very well today against Kansas, right? Kansas rushed for over 200 yards. If they can't stop the run against Oklahoma State gets to kind of ball control this thing. I think that could be danger in Stillwater, because those fans are going to be crazy, like you were saying, Trey. Like, they're going to be crazy. They don't know when the next game is. They feel slighted that Oklahoma's leaving the conference and not even making space for them in the schedule. They feel like they've done something, that's egregious, and whether they're right or wrong, that's not to say, but it is a dangerous spot to play in a rivalry game on the road when the other team's doing something you haven't proven on defense you're very good at stopping. So if they can get past Oklahoma State, I think that they can go ahead and run to the Big 12 championship game. Now, what happens when they get there, I'm gonna let that wait for December, but. I think they can get there. They just have to get past the rivalry game.
Yeah, I'll agree with you on that. I mean, obviously, I guess the goal for Oklahoma after they beat Texas, for Oklahoma fans at least, when over on my show, me and my buddy, he's an Oklahoma fan, and I can tell you the outlook from that program was just, okay, we're just going to win out and get back to the Big 12 championship, and that's the game that's going to matter. And obviously, Kansas comes in, that kind of bites them in the butt. And then, like you said, Oklahoma State, Ollie Gordon, Oklahoma did not look good stopping the run against Devin Neal today, gave up over 100 yards. So Oklahoma State's sneaky 6-2. They're not that bad of a football team. They've looked shaky in a couple games, but they're really not that bad. Not to mention West Virginia. They kind of stay sneaking in. Big win over UCF, which is something obviously Oklahoma couldn't do 2 weeks ago. So I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a uncertainty around Oklahoma's program, and I guess any college football fan can relate. After a close game and then a loss like that where your team kind of looks shaky and looks bad, the confidence level definitely drops as a fan. And like, can we win out? Can we beat BYU? I mean, BYU is not that bad, like, all that good stuff. But I do think they win out. If they can beat Texas in the Big 12 championship, like you said, Garrett, we're just going to have to wait and see on that one. But Oklahoma State next week, like you said, very big game on the road. And then West Virginia, another game that I would look out for. But definitely playoff chances still alive. Big 12 championship chances more than alive.
Well, for all you sickos out there, there's currently a 5-way tie at 4-1 at the top of the Big 12. Sign me up for November, baby. This conference, even losing Oklahoma and Texas next year, is going to be fantastic to follow.
Gracious, how about that?